What's going on, guys? Welcome back to another episode of the Remote Front Office. Um, Today, we are officially about 24 hours away from the tip off of the season. We're actually 24 hours and 30 minutes away from the tip off of the NBA season as of recording this. But before we get started, if you guys are new to the channel, make sure to like, comment, subscribe. We are back this week. We will not have a Friday episode, but the following week be prepared for us to go back to the Monday, Friday content schedule. Today, so my initial plan for today's episode, because I was going to record this, give it a full 24 hours before um, actual game started, because I was going to discuss my thoughts on the two games coming up, and then I was also going to give you guys a couple of bets in my mind to place for the tip off of the NBA season. However, this afternoon and a little bit of last night decided to be the rookie contract extension gold rush, I guess. Um, so instead, what we're going to do is we're going to go over those extensions, and then I'll just give my thoughts on the games. I won't do any picks, and we'll just kind of cover who I think wins, loses, takeaways to expect from the game, etc., etc. So let's go ahead and get into this. So the contract that initially sparked this little run here. So Moses Moody yesterday agreed to a 3-year, $39 million extension with the Golden State Warriors. It's interesting in the fact that his playing time hasn't really been there, right? So I mean, the fact that he's getting a extension off of this is peculiar. Just because Steve Kerr hasn't really been one to willingly play Moses Moody, right? He's played him for stretches, but other than that, he doesn't play super often, right? It's pretty quick, short stints here and there. If there's a lot of injuries and stuff like that, then he gets some burn. But other than that, he doesn't really play a whole lot for them. So I like the deal. Don't get me wrong. I mean, to get him for 13 per, pretty good. That's still a very tradable contract. Um, I'm just curious on the timing, right? Especially for a guy that doesn't play as often. But maybe he's supposed to play more in the rotation this year, and so the Warriors wanted to get ahead of it because they didn't want him going to an open market. So maybe that's the rationale I'm seeing on this. We'll have to kind of wait and see. What started the spark of it today, though, is right around about noon today. Trey Murphy III got his extension from the Pelicans today. So he got 4 years, 112 million. I like the deal for both sides. I understand it. A couple of interesting things to note about his contract is um, there's no incentives. So normally when we see a deal, that 112 is like the absolute highest it can get, right? So there's normally some weird incentives in there, games played, injuries, awards, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, right? Normally that's how you get to the 112 million. Agents just like to have the 112 million because it looks good in the Twitter headline, right? But on his, there's no incentives and there's no player option. So that's the other thing. A lot of guys typically get a player option for their last year, so they can determine, hey, this contract wasn't really, what I was worth. I'm going to go test the open market, or I'm getting paid more than I'm worth. I'm going to stay here, right? So the fact that that is in the works is interesting. Also, there is some news that he's expected to miss some time to start the season. There's no timetable as of right now in Shams' tweet, um, but it's still somewhat interesting, right? Um, that we're not getting a specific amount of time, but the fact they agreed to extension, obviously, I don't think it's a necessarily long-term absence. Maybe it's just kind of a short-term absence as of right now. No details are really given. Um, Next one we're going to get is, let's see here. So the next one that came out a couple hours later was Jalen Green's extension. Jalen Green's extension is a little bit different, right? So it's not very often you don't see guys get the max amount of years, right? Obviously, guys don't get the max amount of money every time. It's not a max rookie deal every single time for an early extension. But it's very odd that a guy doesn't get 5 years off the rip or 4 years player option. Or sometimes obviously just even like 4 years in general if you're adding it onto the current contract. But Jalen Green got extended for 3 years, 106 million. He has a player option for the third year, uh, which is rather interesting, right? So he is the first NBA player to successfully negotiate a 2+1 rookie extension on a basically max extension, is what Shams was saying, right? Obviously, you've seen guys come up with a rookie extension, get a 2+1 before. That's not new. But the guys that typically get the big money are normally guys that are getting the max amount of years, right? Um, so we'll see. I was very curious to see how Houston was going to play their cap space situation. Because I mean, in theory, if they waited, maybe they could have done what the Sixers did with Tyrese Maxey and saved that cap space and then signed Jalen Green and Alperen Sengun afterwards, and just kind of added that onto their cap expense. Or they went this route and they decided to secure Jalen Green early. Don't have to play the back and forth on the upcoming season, and they just get to, play it out. I think a 3-year deal is good for both sides. Obviously, if you're the Rockets, you want to see a longer term deal. If you're Jalen Green's camp, though, you want a shorter term deal because this will allow him to sign an extension sooner, especially if he outplays his contract, right? The other thing that is interesting is just where are the Rockets going in their general direction, right? They've got a lot of young guys on this roster, a lot of young guys that need minutes. You've now got young guys that are getting paid that need minutes. Uh, Obviously, Fred VanVleet and Dillon Brooks aren't long-term solutions, but they're still a part of this roster. We've seen Jalen Green have his ups and downs with this group, whether it's the buying in defensively or just other impact on the court as a young scoring guard, right? Just trying to figure out other ways to impact the game, if you will, if you want to use that cliche. But I think 3-year deal's good. We'll see. I almost feel like some of this is predicated off of when Alperen Sengun was out, and you saw Jabari Smith Jr. play center and really kind of open the court for him that last month and a half of the season. Obviously, the thing with that is last month and a half of the season, some teams aren't necessarily trying, so maybe the stats look a little better than they should. But we'll see. I mean, I'm very curious to see how Houston handles this going forward. As well as I'm just curious to see, do they want to keep one of these guys on a bigger extension because it's easier for them to trade a guy on a bigger salary for a max salary guy rather than having to pile together 4 of these smaller contract guys to go get a max guy, right? Maybe that's part of this too. The next guy that got his extension about an hour after this was Jalen Suggs. Jalen Suggs got a 5-year, $150 million extension. He was named All Defensive Team this past season. I really liked the growth from Jalen Suggs last year compared to the year before. The shooting, the defense, just kind of settling into what his role is in the NBA. I think he's made a really big leap in that world. So to see him get a 5-year extension, I had a feeling his extension was coming soon. I kind of figured that they would wait another year just because you just did the Franz extension this year. Paolo's extension's coming up here pretty soon. So to see Orlando go from being a team that had all this flexibility and this cap space and everything like that before we signed KCP, we in Orlando Magic terms, you know what I mean. But to see them go from being a team with cap space and flexibility and, well, maybe if you trade this guy and maybe if you shuffle this around and that around, you can go get another guy, to now you've signed Franz on his extension. You've brought in KCP for his couple of years. You restructured Jonathan Isaac. You now signed Jalen Suggs. Paolo's got another year or two until his extension starts to kick in. This team comes very expensive very fast. And I don't know what your long-term plans for centers are. I mean, if Jalen Suggs is the point guard of the future, great. Makes this a lot easier to navigate. But if he's not a full-time point guard, this is a really big leap of faith to trust that he can be a full-time point guard, especially with KCP next to him, who's not necessarily a creator by any means. But I do like this deal. I like Jalen Suggs coming out of the draft. I really wanted him to be a part of the Bulls trading Zach LaVine in my hopeful hypotheticals. I really wanted him to be a part of that deal, but he is now long term in Orlando Magic, at least for the time being. Um, the next guy to get a deal pretty shortly after. Corey Kispert got a 4-year, $54 million extension with the Wizards. I like the deal for both sides. I think Kispert showed promise as far as just being a shooter, spacer, um, just a positive value for this team, honestly. Let's be honest. This team is very early in a rebuilding stage of this organization. To have a guy that you have on a very team-friendly deal, he's still going to get plenty of playing time, plenty of time to grow, plenty of time to expand his role. And you lock him down for the long term, right? You don't let him go into restricted free agency and have some other team, aka what Sacramento did to the Bulls with the LaVine contract, and blow it up, or the Nets did with Portland with Allen Crabbe. You secure him on a very team-friendly deal. This obviously, as the salary cap goes up, this is basically mid-level money. So mid-level money for Corey Kispert, I'm perfectly fine with that. That's the other thing you guys are going to have to start kind of looking at when you see these deals. Don't think of it in terms of the year salary. Don't think of it in terms of the total deal salary. Think of it in terms of percentage of the cap or what other exceptions are out there, right? So you've got your taxpayer mid-level, you've got your regular mid-level, trade exceptions. Like, there's all these other things that this contract fits fairly nicely into, right? And teams are always going to need shooting. It's a premium in the NBA. So to get a positive shooter that's young and can develop for 4 years, $54 million, I think is a win personally. Next guy to get a deal, we have Jaden Hardy on the Mavericks. Got a 3-year, $18 million extension. He was a later, I believe he was a second round pick actually for Dallas a couple of years ago. Again, pretty same thing to the Corey Kispert deal, right? You're getting him for under what you pay the mid-level. 3 years. He's shown flashes. Makes me hesitate a little bit now that Spencer Dinwiddie's there. I don't really know his role. Again, it's a long regular season though. Dinwiddie has an injury history. Kyrie has an injury history. If anything, you're giving him a chance to develop, and you're not expecting anything from him right away, right? We all kind of knew that Jaden Hardy was going to be more of a long-term project than a short-term project. So just kind of having that security of, you have him for at least the next 3 years at a very reasonable salary that you can trade or keep, or just you allow yourself that flexibility, right? You can solidify a little bit more of this roster as you start to get guys on longer term deals now. And I think going forward, it allows you plenty of flexibility. So I think it's a win for both sides. The most recent deal we got here, and the last deal actually, is Jalen Johnson. So Jalen Johnson, similar to Jalen Suggs, got a 5-year, $150 million rookie extension. Makes sense for both sides. Again, I think this is about what you were going to pay for Jalen Johnson in this current market. It's a fully guaranteed deal as well, which means there's no options on it. Fully guaranteed. The one thing that makes me nervous, right, is if you're Atlanta, you now have Jalen Johnson's deals done. Onyeka Okongwu is on his extension. It's a very team-friendly extension. I like his extension. But you now have all of these wings that you have to figure out, right? And I understand that Jalen Johnson is probably second in the pecking order on this team right now, right? Don't get me wrong. Fairly confident that is the pecking order right now. As it goes Trae Young and then Jalen Johnson. If this goes sideways, though, you are then paying Jalen Johnson for the future. Now, granted, I think if it goes really sideways, you can trade Jalen Johnson for a bunch of picks. I would not be surprised at all if you're able to get 3 or 4 first-round picks for Jalen Johnson. It would not surprise me. However, I don't necessarily know if I would have made this move now. From everything I read, it seems like I totally forgot today was the rookie extension deadline for guys. So, I mean, it makes sense from that aspect, right? I'm just very torn on the direction of Atlanta. I'm also very torn on how I feel like a lot of guys didn't get negotiated down, right? I understand that the rookie contract extension is supposed to be what I think it's Bobby Marks that terms this as the fun max, right? This is a guy that's on the up and up. You give him the fun max. It's all good news, all sunshine and rainbows. There's no negatives. Congratulations, you got your young, promising player, future MVP, etc., etc., etc. I just think with the second apron and how cap space is going to go, you're really not allowing yourself to thread the needle. Because, so if you're Atlanta, you have Dyson Daniels that's going to be coming up. Obviously, you just drafted Zach Parise, so you got a couple years for him. But I don't know how you fill out your rotation going forward. Obviously, Capella comes off the books. Are you then counting on Nneka Okongwu to be a full-time starter? Because I've wanted him to start for the last couple of years. He hasn't gotten the chance to. But I think that teams need to be a little more cautious with this, right? Because the last guy that I forgot to add into this, because I don't think Shams had it, because I was literally just going through Shams' thread here, I'm going to be honest, is Alperen Sengun also signed his extension today. And so the thing was with how I viewed teams as being built, right? You have the guys that are on the fun max. Okay, let's use Houston for an example, right? Let's go back to Houston here because Alperen Sengun, his deal did come through. I forgot it wasn't on Shams' Twitter. So Alperen Sengun got a 5-year, $185 million extension that includes the player option for the last year. Okay. So initially going into this season, I liked where the Rockets were. You had a young roster with a lot of promising young players, guys that could play both sides of the ball, and you had flexibility, right? You didn't have much time left on Fred VanVleet's contract. Dillon Brooks' contract was almost up. Oof, sorry. But you just, like, the flexibility was there for the team, right? It made sense. You could, okay, so I've got their cap sheet pulled up now. So Fred VanVleet has a team option for next year, and then he's a free agent, right? Steven Adams is off the books after this year. Jeff Green's off the books after this year. Where's the contract I'm looking for? Dillon Brooks, thank you. Okay, so Dillon Brooks still has a couple of years. So Dillon Brooks has 2 more years after this year. No options, right? But Fred VanVleet, that was the big one that you could get out of after this year. You still had Jalen Green on his rookie scale. And then you also still had basically your entire young core on their rookie deals, right? So I just didn't feel like there was much of a rush to get this done. I'm going to be entirely honest. Like, I understand that it sets, quote unquote, a bad precedent, or however you want to phrase it, right? Let those guys go into free agency. There's not a lot of teams with cap space next year, right? Like, there's not a lot of options out there, let alone that somebody's going to pay Jalen Green and Alperen Sengun. I don't see it, right? Maybe somebody gives them like a 2-year deal or something, or a 3-year deal like Jalen Green got, right? Maybe it's something like that. But in the long run, I don't think there was a team that was going to outbid you for both guys. I get it that for whatever reason, there's a stipulation that it sets a bad precedent if you don't extend your guy, and that means something's wrong, right? I don't think there is, right? I think we jumped the gun too quickly on these rookie extensions. Again, I'm going to go back to Orlando. I feel like I've repeated the Orlando thing 6 times now. They are now in a very thin margin for error, right? This team got to be the fun team that played defense, that hustled, that, was picking people up full court. that was just that young, energetic team, you now have expectations, right? You now have KCPs on your roster. You now have why am I blanking on people right now? You now have Jalen Suggs on a extension. You now have Franz Wagner on a big term extension. I mean, granted, Jonathan Isaac's deal is fantastic. Can the Bulls trade for Jonathan Isaac, please? I beg of you, as a biased Bulls fan, please. But you're gonna the extensions we just saw for Franz and Jalen Suggs this year, you're in the same boat for Paolo next year. Because Paolo has next year and then he's a restricted free agent. So it always happens that year before. You're in the same boat. So if that's the case, right, you're going to have, let's see here, Wendell Carter's on an extension for almost $20 million at that point in time once Paolo's deal kicks in. Jalen Suggs is a little over $28 million when that kicks in. You're at Anthony Black has $10 million because of his rookie deal. Franz Wagner's at almost 42 by that point. So like your team and KCP's got a player option for $22 million. At that point, there you go. There's your rotation. Congratulations. Maybe you can go get a minimum guy or like a mid-level exception guy. But your flexibility is gone. I understand that players don't truly enter free agency anymore, right? It's kind of that year before, here's an extension, or let's trade you somewhere and then you can sign. That's kind of what free agency has become now. But at some point, you still have to have the flexibility to go get the guy, right? You don't want to trade one of your core four guys to go get a guy you think improves those core four guys because that's the only way the salaries work, right? Like at some point, you have to have some flexibility. So the fact that these teams are kind of pigeonholing themselves where they're at concerns me a little bit. I understand the cap's going to go up, unlimited money, yada, yada, yada. The second apron thing, we've seen clearly by GMs, organizations, etc. They treat that second apron thing like it's a real big time deal, right? It's not a joke. So if you guys are signing all these rookie fun extensions and you want to be like, oh, max, here you go, done, problem solved. We're done, our job's done. Max extension. At some point, it's going to become a problem. I'm just saying. But now that we're off of that, the games for tomorrow. So tomorrow is the tip-off of the 2024 season. In typical tip-off fashion, we have 2 games tomorrow, and then basically almost every other team plays Wednesday, and then there's 4 games Thursday, and then we're back to every team plays, and we're in that fun rotation of the beginning of the year, which I kind of enjoy, but kind of hate at the same time, because then I have to have a bunch of split screens and whatever. So tomorrow, we have 2 games. As of right now, first game tomorrow is Knicks Celtics. I'm going to pull up the FanDuel odds because I'm fantastic at preparation here. And we're going to look at this. So, without looking at the odds yet, I think the Knicks are winning this game. I know, crazy. I think there's going to be a lot of energy. I think there's going to be a lot of nerves. I understand the game is in Boston, which, if anything, I would assume means that you are able to get a spread on tomorrow. So the Celtics are favored by 5.5 points tomorrow. I'm taking the Knicks to cover the spread, right? I know I wasn't initially going to do picks, but screw it, we're here. I think you take the Knicks to cover the spread. Here's why. Other than the bench centers for New York, right? So Mitchell Robinson's out until who knows when. Precious Achiuwa went down, I think, earlier today, and will be reevaluated in 2 to 4 weeks. Other than that, though, OG Anunoby, Cat, McHale, Brunson, Josh Hart, all those guys. This is the healthiest of that core group you're getting the entire year. And mainly, I mean OG Anunoby and Karl-Anthony Towns. Healthiest you're going to get, right? Porzingis is also not playing, right? So I think all of that put together, I think the Knicks can at least cover the spread. Do they win the game? We'll see. But I think they at least cover the spread of 5.5 points, right? I personally would take that. And then I'd probably put like Jalen Brunson to score 20 plus. Maybe I'll cook up a parlay and put it on Twitter or something. We'll see. But as of right now, bare minimum, Knicks cover the spread. Right. I think that's the first part. Game number 2, we have the T-Wolves at the Los Angeles Lakers. The Lakers, for some godforsaken reason, are adding a point in this game for whatever reason. Not entirely sure why. But I mean, hey, means they're, it's the Lakers boost, right? We all know every year, you get the hit or miss. Of the Lakers get plus X amount of points, especially in Staples, plus X amount of points. Obviously, I think the Wolves win this game. I understand, again, kind of a similar logic for the Lakers. This is the healthiest they're going to be. As we use the next, right, you have a healthy LeBron, healthy AD, D'Lo, Austin Reeves, etc., right? Healthiest they're going to be. However, it is Anthony Edwards in Staples Center. If you don't think Anthony Edwards, after that Olympic run, is coming out and saying, let's go, or, Dante DiVincenzo coming out, let's go. Again, healthiest Mike Conley is going to be. I think the Wolves win, right? I probably wouldn't take the spread just because, at that point, it's +1. You get -110 versus -102, right? So, personally, I'm going just money line. Wolves win. And then probably Anthony Edwards points. LeBron, you can add in like points, rebounds, assists, the typical LeBron stuff. But yeah, so that is the 2 games for tomorrow. Won't be live for them, but I will be watching those. Again, we'll see if we have a pod Friday going over games. As of that point, the Bulls don't play until Friday night. So maybe we wait till Monday, because at that point, Bulls will have played 3 games. So maybe we get a Bulls rant already, because that gives me a chance to look at the Thunder, the Bucks, and the Pelicans. So maybe that's what we look at. Obviously, early in the year, you guys will see a lot of Bulls content one way or the other. I will try and watch as many teams as possible these next couple of days. With the schedule Wednesday, I'm obviously not going to get to a whole bunch of teams. But tomorrow's games I'll be pretty invested in. And then we will have Thursday's games. It's pretty even as far as only 2 games in a time slot, which will be nice. And then Friday, who knows? I'm maybe going to have, 6 different splits or something. I don't know. I'll have to figure it out. But anyhow, I appreciate you guys coming through. I will catch you guys. Let's just call it Monday. Appreciate y'all coming through. Peace.